Okay, folks, this is a tutorial on PassportJS using JSON web tokens to authenticate a NodeJS and ReactJS application. So what I'm going to do is run you through how to first set up the Node application, and then we will add a front end, a React front end onto that afterwards. So I'm going to start right from the beginning. So here I am in my apps directory. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do create React app. I'm going to call this React Passport Auth. We'll call this template. And we're going to go ahead and let React create our application there for us. This will just take a second. All right, once that's done, I'm going to CD into that. Let's call it template. And I'm going to open that up in VS Code here. So here's my application. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do is separate out the React end and the Node side of the application. So I'm going to do a new folder. We'll call this client. Into here, I'm going to move the Node modules, the public folder, the source folder, the package.json, and the yarn.lock. Okay, now that we've got this, we can go ahead and open up our VS Code terminal. Here I am inside of that application. I'm going to go ahead and npm init. So now we're going to end up with a new package.json, and that is the beginning of our Node application. Okay. So from here, we do need to install some packages that we're going to use on our Node server. So npm install, you can go ahead and just install. I'm going to go ahead and install all of these at once. You can do the same thing. And we'll import them and require them as necessary. So we're going to use something called ReactJS. We're going to use concurrently. We're going to use .env, express, JSON web token. We're going to use Morgan, MySQL 2, Passport JWT. You can actually see that I've installed these before. And I'm going to hit return. And that's just going to take a second to go through and install all of those packages for us. While we're waiting for those to install, it looks like they're done. Great. We're going to go ahead and add some scripts here. So we're going to leave test here, but we're going to have one called client install. We're going to call this npm install. I'm going to do -- prefix client, which means npm install inside of the client directory. We're also going to do server, and this is going to be node server.js. Actually, we're going to use nodemon, so let's do nodemon on here. I'm going to start. This would be for starting on node server, so we'll do node server.js. We're going to do client, because we want to be able to start a React server as well, which is npm start. Well, obviously, we want to do that inside of the client directory, so we do -- prefix client and dev. And this is the one you really need to worry about, right? So we're going to do concurrently. We're going to do a backslash, and we want to run npm run server. The backslash here is just escaping these double quotations for us. We also want to run npm run client. So by running npm runs dev, we'll actually run the command concurrently npm run server and npm run client. That will run our Node server and then our React server. We can see here under dependencies that we've got all the dependencies that we need. And our main file here is not going to be index.js, it's going to be server.js. Great, I save that. And then I can actually just run npm run dev down here. And this is expecting a server.js file, which we are going to see briefly. But here we are, our application is now live. I'm going to close that down because we're not going to be worrying about the front end right now. So what I want to do is go ahead and create the folders and the stuff that we need in order to set up our Node application to be authenticated by Passport. So the first thing I want to do actually is create a new folder, which I'm going to call models. And inside of models, we're going to have a user model. And we create our user model by doing model.exports equals function. We're going to take sequelize with a lowercase s and sequelize with a capital S. Put our curly braces. And we have const user equals sequelize.define. And we're going to call it user, comma. And now we're going to have our model. So we're going to have an ID. The type of this ID, I actually want to use something called UID, which will give us, instead of a 1, 2, 3, 4, actually give us a random string. And we're going to make this the primary key by doing primary key is true. The default value is then going to be sequelize.uuidv4. And you guys can actually look up what the difference is between UUID 1, 2, 3, 4 on your own time. But we'll do first name. We'll type sequelize.string. And I want to make this required. So I'm going to do allow null is false. Okay, so I'm going to have a few more fields. I'm going to copy this down. 2, 3, 4. We're going to have last name. This is going to be exactly the same. We're going to have email here, which again is going to be exactly the same. And password, which is going to be exactly the same. And after all that, we want to return the model by saying return user. And that's our model. Being that we're using sequelize, we do also need index.js. And I'm going to go ahead and copy all that stuff in for you right here. You'll be able to grab this code from the repository at the end of the tutorial. Okay, that is our model set up. So the next thing I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this config. And we're going to need a few different things in config. First thing we're going to need is a keys folder. So we call this keys.js, and we do module.exports equals, and we call this secret or key. Now, you could just go ahead and put your key in here. I don't want to do that. I actually want to use an env file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do process.env, and I'm going to call this secret _or_key. And I'm going to hit save. We also want to set up our database. So we're going to do that by doing a config.js. We're going to have module.exports equals. And a lot of this is boilerplate. You've seen this before. And we're going to have a username, which I'm going to say is process.env.db_username. We have a password, which is going to be process.env.db_password. And obviously you can make these call whatever you want. I just like calling them db_ whatever they are. Database is going to be process.env.db database. We're going to have a host, which will be process.env.db host. The dialect that we're going to use here is MySQL. And then we're going to have logging set to false. All right, we want to copy this twice because we're going to have development, but we're also going to have test and production. Sweet. So let's go ahead and create our env file, new file, .env. And inside of this env, we actually want to put all the variables. So we created one called secret or key. Now you probably want to randomize this to a long string, but I'm just going to call it my secret key. And then DB username, because I'm using a local DB, is going to be root. But DB password, which I have set up on my machine, is password. And then DB database, we're going to call this React Auth template. And then DB host is going to be localhost. And that's it. That's our env file. So we're set up with that. The last thing that we're going to need is a passport.js file. And this is where we're really getting into the meat of what passport.js is. So the first thing we need to do is we need to require the DB. So we do const db equals require. And then we have // models. So we're coming out of, here's passport, we're coming out of config, going into models, and requiring all the models. The other thing we need to do is the keys. So we'll const keys equals require /config/keys. Okay, we're going to have an object of options, which we'll set to an empty object for now. But then what we want to do is actually add things into this. So we're going to do ops.jwt from request equals extract JWT.from auth header as bearer token. And what this actually does is it allows Passport to extract our auth token from the header, which we're going to see later on. We're also going to add in the keys. So ops.secret or key equals keys. That's our file right here, keys. And then we want secret or key. So keys.secret or key. And then we want our module.exports. And inside of here, we're going to call passport.use. And inside of passport.use, we need to have a new JWT strategy. So before we go ahead and do all of this, we do need to import passport. So we'll do const JWT strategy equals require passport. And this is something we imported earlier, passport JWT.strategy. This just means that we're going to use the JWT version of Passport, right? We could use Google, we could use Facebook, but we're using JWT. The other thing we want is our extract JWT, which is equal to require passport-jwt.extract JWT. So we're importing those two modules from the Passport JWT library. Okay. So we now we've got passport.use equals a new JWT strategy, and we're going to have ops JWT payload and done. It's going to take two parameters. And our ops right here is this right here. After that, that's we're going to call a function. So this is actually does need to take in passport. So we'll put that in right there. You can see all this stuff comes up well. And then here, once we hit the passport route, and this is not going to make a lot of sense right now, but it will as we come to writing out routes. So when we use passport, what we want to do is we want to do db.user.find1, where ID is equivalent to JWT payload.id. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to get the ID as part of the JWT payload, and then we'll be able to find a user. Once we get a user, we're going to do a .then user, and then we're going to check if there's actually a user return. We're going to say, cool, go ahead and authenticate and return the user. Otherwise, return done null and just return false. We're also going to have a .catch in case there are any errors, and we're just going to console log those errors. Okay, cool. That's us all set with our passport.js file. And we will refer back to this in a little bit. For now, that is stuff. So I can close these down. And now what we're going to do is going to go ahead and set up our server.js. So we're going to load up server.js. We're going to have an Express application. So I'm going to import Express. I'm going to say require Express. Also going to require our .env package early on because we are using those environmental variables. And all of these imports you can actually check in the documentation. And also going to require passport because that is the package that's doing all this work. We're going to have const port equals process.env.port or 5000. The process.env.port for when we're ready to deploy to something like Heroku. We're going to initialize our Express application. There we go. And we're also going to use paths. I'm going to require path right now. So we do need a couple of pieces of middleware. You might be used to seeing body parser, but that is no longer needed. So we can do express.url encoded If you're unsure what any of this is, you can Google it and look in the documentation, but we're basically just setting up our Node application to use Express and to return information to us in JSON. We do want to pull in the passport middleware. So we'll do app.use passport.initialize. And then we do have that passport config. So we want to pass that into our application as well. Passport config. And we're going to do require config / PassportJS. And we're going to pass passport package into that. So if we look at passport.js, remember how we pulled in the passport package? This is a parameter. That's where this is coming from, right here. We're also going to require some routes, which we don't yet have, but I'm going to require those anyway. We're going to locate those in a routes directory under API, under user, and we're going to pass into those routes our entire application. We also want to require our models. So we do const db equals require /models. And then we're actually going to start up our application. So we do db.sequelize.sync. That just gets our application up and running with our database, which returns a promise with a function. And we're going to say if process.env.node_env equals production. So basically, if this is a production application, right, we want to set a static folder. And the way we do that is we'll do app.use express.static. And then we want in client, we want /build. Now you don't have to worry about this unless you're actually deploying your application to production. And what this will do, it'll say on any route that gets called, have our request and our response. But then what we're going to do is we're going to send the file of index.html. So we'll do path.resolve _ dir name. And then we're going to go into client build. And then the file we want is index.html. Otherwise, app.listen port, and we want a console.log server is running on port, and we'll using a template literal class in our variable here. And then we are all set. Except I have an error here, so I'm missing a curly brace somewhere. Close that. So file. App.listen. I just need another parenthesis right there. Okay, so we should be up and running. So now I go ahead and I'm going to clear this out. If I do npm run start, it should try and load that up, and it's now going to say can't find module routes API. So what we're going to do, there's a start right here, user. I'm going to go ahead and create that folder. We have routes. Inside of routes, we're going to have API. Inside of that, we're going to have a folder called a file called user.js. And this is where we're going to have all of our user routes. So what I always like to do is do a module.exports, and then we're going to pull in our app, and curly braces. And then all I want to do is have a test route. So I'm going to do app.get API /user/test, which is going to have our request and our response. And I want to just res.json a message, basically. I want to do success, true, and message testing endpoint works. Okay, let's go ahead and load up our application again, and it's going to say unknown database. So open up SQL Workbench. And what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to do create database, and we called this, I believe, template off. Let's go to React auth template. I'm going to create that database right here using MySQL. Hit OK, that's good. In fact, if I refresh right here, you should see that show up right here, React auth template. I'm going to load my application. And this is actually telling me that I've got 5,000 already in use. So I'm going to go ahead and kill that port. 75. Up we go. Server is running on port 5,000. So if I come up here and I actually refresh this, I should now have my table as well. Users, select rows, and I've got ID, first name, last name, email, password, and then SQLize has gone ahead and added the created at an updated at fields for us. So I don't need this, and I don't need this, and I don't need this anymore. So actually what I want to do now is check that this endpoint works. So I'm going to do that with Postman. I'm going to go ahead and load that up real quick. Here it is. So it's a GET request, and it's going to be to localhost 5000/API/user/test. Hit send, and there we are. We are in business. Our application is up, it's running, it's working. But now what I actually want to do is make this an authenticated endpoint. And so the way we do that is by calling in Passport right here. So we're going to pull in the Passport module, Passport equals require Passport. I'm going to say passport.authenticate. So this is middleware to our route. So when we call a route, it will actually execute this function before it even reviews the request or sends a response. So we do passport.authenticate, and this is a function. I'm going to put another comment here just to separate this out. And inside of this method, we call the type we're using, which is JWT, and we're not using session. So we do session : false. And then I hit save, and you just saw that it jumped around and edited itself. I'm going to kill my server. I'm actually going to run npm run dev so that our server restarts for us. It's also going to launch our React server in another window, but I'm going to ignore that for now. So now you can see if I hit save, it's just going to restart our server for us right down here. Back over to Postman, hit send. Now I get unauthorized. And the reason for this is because what it's actually doing is it's looking for a JWT token, which is a JSON web token. It's a type of special token that you can use with applications to authenticate a route. We haven't done anything with that here. So it looked for the token, it didn't find the token, and so it sent back that this route was unauthorized. So now what we want to do is actually set up users and allow them to log in and retrieve a token. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import a few more things here so we can actually create a route that allows us to create a user. So we're going to need bcrypt, which is a package that allows us to encrypt packages. So we're going to have bcrypt, which we're going to require from bcrypt.js. We're also going to need our models. So we're going to have const db equals require / out of API, out of routes, into models. We're also going to actually need the JSON Web Token package. So we're going to require JWT from JSON Web Token. And we're going to need our keys folder. So we're going to, our keys file. So we're going to require keys from require, and we /config/keys. Okay. So now what we actually want to do is create a route that allows us to create a new user in our database. So this is going to be and I always like to have comments with my route. So we're going to call this a post route, and it's going to be to API/users. And the description of this route is basically it's going to create a new user. Okay, so our route is going to be app.post, and it's going to go to API/user, which is going to take a request and a response. And see my arrow in here. So the first thing we want to do when we create a user is check to see whether that user already exists. So I'm going to do db.user.findOne, and I'm going to look where email is whatever we get from the request. So you could, where email is equal to rec.body.request. Once we call that, we're going to have a .bad, which is going to return a user object to us. And we're going to say if there's a user already, we can return res.status 400. We do this in JSON format. I'm going to say email. This email already exists. And these error messages we're actually going to use a little later in application when we get to coding out the front end. Semicolon there. Okay, and then we're going to have an else. So else, if user exists, great, send it back and say, hey, this email already exists, you can't sign up. Otherwise, we want to create a new user. So we're going to create a new user object, we're going to call const new user equals. The first name is going to be rec.body.firstname. Last name is going to be rec.body.lastname. And these are all just the things that we put in our user model. We're going to have an email, which is rec.body.email, and a password, which is rec.body.password. We're not ready to save it to the database yet. We actually want to make sure that this password gets hashed and is saved securely. So the way we do this is we call the bcrypt package, and we call the gen_salt method, which is generating a salt. We pass in 10, which returns an error in a salt. And then we're going to hash it, bcrypt.hash new user.password. So we're actually going to hash whatever is in rec.body.password. We pass the salt in as well, which returns an error or a hash. We want to handle that error, so we say if there's an error, just go ahead and throw the error. Otherwise, new user.password gets reassigned to whatever the hash is. So the password gets hashed, returns that as a hash, which is just a string of random characters. If there's an error, great, throw the error. If there's not an error, go ahead and reassign whatever the user password is now to this hashed version password. Now we're ready to save it. db.user.create, and we're going to pass a new user. If the user is created, we're going to return a user, and we're going to return res.status of 200, and then a JSON message which says message user account successfully created. And we'll have a user created Boolean off true. If a user was not successfully created, we do want to catch that error. And for now, we're just going to go ahead and console.log that error. Okay, so now that we have this route up and running, we should be able to actually go to Postman and create this. So if there's going to be a post request, it's going to be the local host 5000/API/user, right? /user. And we do need to send along the body with this. So the body, I'm going to raw, and I'm going to do this in JSON. And we know we need a first name. I'm just use mine, which is Alec. The last name, down, email, alec@gmail.com. And the password, I'm just going to set, as I always do, the string password. And if we go ahead and hit send, no response. Oh, I already have 500 here, 5,000. Send. Okay, cool. User was created. How can we verify this? We can just check our database. We go here, I'm going to refresh this. And I'm going to select rows, and here we are, ID. That's our UUID v4. With the first name, the last name, email. We've got our hash password. You see this isn't just a string password. And then SQLite has gone ahead and added in the created at and updated values for us. So that's it. So now we have a user. So once we have a user, we want to be able to log in a user, right? So we're going to create a route for that. And as always, I'm going to have my comments. I'm going to call this route. This is going to be a post request, and it's going to be to /API/user/login. And the description is going to be logs in the user. Okay. So we have app.post. This is going to be to API/user/login. Rec.res. And then we're actually going to accept rec.body.email and rec.body.password. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deconstruct those. I'm going to pull those out of rec.body. Rec.body. In fact, we could do the same thing up here. We could do const email, password, username. Well, we have username. We have first name and last name equals rec.body. And then here, this would now become email is the same as email, which we no longer need because ES6 tells us we can just keep them the same. Same here. This, and rec.body password. And save. If I come over here and just to show that that still works, hopefully, I'm going to change this to down to 2 and 2. I'm going to go ahead and hit send. And now I can actually see that that created. Refresh. Select rows. Now we've got our 2 users. Okay, cool. So I'm pulling those out. And the first thing I want to do is check to see if this user exists. So db.user.find1, where email is the same as email, right? And then we'll have a .then. We're just going to return a user object. And we're going to say if no user, return res.status for not found .json, user not found. Okay. Then inside of here, if it is found, what we actually want to do is let current user equal user.get. So what that will do is actually extract all the information for us. And then we're going to check and compare the passwords. So compare the passwords. And now we need to use bcrypt again, and we can call the compare method. We're going to pass in the password that we received from rec.body and against the hash password, which is current user.password. We're also going to return a promise. We're going to return a true or false of is match. And now we're going to say if there is a match, db.user.find1, where ID is the same as user ID. Then user. So if there's a match in the password, grab that user, and now we're going to create what we call a payload. We're going to say const payload equals, and we want to put a few things in this payload. We want the user ID. We want the email, user email. We want the first name, it's going to be user.first name, and the last name is user.last name. And then what we do is we sign it using the JWT package. We do JWT.sign. We pass in the payload. We also pass in the secret key. And we pass in how long we want this JSON web token to last for. So you might remember that there are some applications where you've logged in, and after an hour, you actually have to log back in again. But that's what we do here. We say expires in and you could do 3600 seconds, which would be an hour. I'm actually going to make it a day for development purposes. And this is going to return an error or a token. We'll just say res.json, and we want all of the payload. We're going to use the spread operator here to grab all of the payload in this object, and then to the object, we're going to add success true, and we're going to add the token. And I'm going to do this by saying bearer, and then I'm going to pass the token in using string literals. I'm going to put a semicolon here, a semicolon here. This is good. And then at the end of this, we actually want a .catch. If there's an error, also .log the error. Sorry, this should be here. And then because this is our else statement right here, if else, if there's no user to be found, return res.status 400.json password user password could not be validated. It's not if the user is not found. Basically, we're saying if there's a match, if the password is a match, do all of this. If it's not a match, if for some reason it could not be validated, we're just going to send a message back saying that the password could not be validated. And that's it. We're going to save. It's going to reformat all our code for us. And now if we go over to Postman, I'm going to do a new one. I'm going to do post. I'm going to post route. I'm going to localhost 5000/API/user/login. And in the body, we know we need that to be JSON. And this is going to accept an email, which when I created my user, was allendown@gmail.com. And my password, if you remember, was just the string password. So with any luck, if I go ahead and hit send here, there it is. So here's the payload, right? It's the ID, the email, the first name, and the last name. ID, email, first name, last name. And then we added in success, and we added in the token. Now, something to bear in mind is that this payload, this is encrypted inside of the token. So later on, when we authenticate our routes and we send the token, we're going to be able to extract this information and use this. But for now, we've got our bearer token. So if we go back over to our test route, remember if we hit send here, we get unauthorized because it's looking for that token. So what we can do is come here to where we just logged in, and this token is good for 12 hours. We're going to grab the token, everything but the bearer, right? So I just want everything inside the quotations, but not the word bearer. I'm going to Control C or Command C that. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to go to authorization. And under type, I'm going to select bearer token. And I'm going to empty out anything that's in there, and then I'm going to paste in that new token. Now if I hit send, it works, right? Take that token out, send. It doesn't work. Put the token in the header of the request, send. Now it works. Okay, so if we go back and look at our routes real quick, just so you can see that. This is a regular route, right? It's got app.post, it's got the URL, it's got recres. App/user recres. This is our creating a new user. But on this one, we have the endpoint, and then we have this middleware of Passport. So that's what it's looking. That's what's happening here. It's jumping over to Passport to authenticate. It's going over to here, and it's looking right here to see JWT payload. That's our payload right here. It's grabbing the token, and it's comparing the ID that's in that payload right here against whether there's an ID, a user that exists with the ID. If there is, it's going to return it back over to our route, and then we can do something with that. So in the case of logging in, we actually get a user returned. We can now find one where the user ID matches and so on. Cool. So the last thing I want to do is actually create an update route. So in case a user wanted to update their credentials. So I come down to the end of this route right here. And I'm going to do //@route. And it's going to be a put route, and it would be a /API/users slash I. No, we're not going to need rec.params. We're going to actually grab the ID from the user object. So if I do app.put, and this is to show you kind of what you can do with this authentication thing. So basically, every time you send a request now from Postman and you put that token inside of authorization, all of this data becomes available to us. Everything that we see here becomes available to us. And so I'll demonstrate that. Yeah, /API/user. I'm going to do passport.authenticate. It's going to be JWT, and the session is going to be false. This gets very repetitive. After this, we're going to have our res, our error function. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to console.log rec.user for us, because I want you to see that. So I'm going to open up a new route right here. This is a put request, and it's to localhost 5000. It's going to be to /API/user. So just watch down here when we go ahead and hit this route now. You go to authorization, I'm going to go to bearer token, and I'm going to paste in that bearer token, and I'm going to hit send. All right, so here's our rec.user. Now if I scroll up, you can actually see here under user data values, here's our stuff. Here's our ID, our user ID, our name, and our email. It also got our hashed password and our created and updated app. So all of that came from this token. So what does that mean? So it used to be that we were updating a user. What we probably would have done is /API/user/ something like ID, and then we would have actually had to get the ID on our front end and pass that in and grab it out of the parameters, right? But we don't need to do that anymore. Now that we have this route that's an authenticated route, we can actually just do db.user.update. The fields that we want to update are first name, rec.body.first name, last name, rec.body.last name, and email, which we rec.body.email. And we want to do this where ID is not equal to rec.params.id, but rec.user.id. And I know it says data values here, but we just don't need to use this data value. So it's rec.user.id. Once that happens, if we get a successful update, we want to say db.user.find by parameters, which is now going to be, let's do find by ID rec.user.id. Then we'll have a user that will return, which we res.status 200.json, first name, user.first name, last name, user.last name, email will be user.email. We're going to send a message as well that says user account successfully updated. And I'll also say user updated. We also want to catch this just in case. So we'll say .catch res.status 500 JSON. And we'll just send back the error. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and test that. So we've got our update request, we've got our authorization token. So I'm going to go to body, I'm going to go to raw, I'm going to go to JSON. So we're going to have first name. So originally my first name was Alec. I'm actually just going to update that then to Alexander. I'm going to say last name is still down, and email is still alvon@gmail.com. Before I send that off, I'm just going to verify our service domain. And send. We only have an error. Like errors db.user.find by ID. So something we can actually do is do find. We'll just change this. This might be mongoose. We'll do find one. And then I'm going to say where ID is the same as rec.user.id. Let's give that a shot. I think that'll work for us. Okay, cool. There we go. So now we can actually see Alexander down, add now gmail.com. User account was successfully updated. User updated true. Just to verify that, here we got Alec and Alec2. If I refresh these and then select rows, Alexander. So we are all good there. So now we've got our routes. They're authenticated routes. Our model works. We're pretty much done on the back end of stuff here. I don't think we need any more user routes at this point. We're just going to have login. We've got tests. We've tested our authentication. Our server works. That's nice and easy. One thing I did notice is that our node modules right here is not being get ignored. So when you go into your get ignore, you'll see the slash. Just take the slash away. And that will say, hey, every node module is not just the one that's in this folder. So we hit save. Now you'll see this is grayed out. Great, it's get ignored. So if you are committing this to GitHub, you can go ahead and do so safely without sending all those node module packages. Okay, I think we are just about ready to go ahead and start tackling the front end. So you can see how this gets tied into a login form. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull my text editor over a little bit. And I'm going to grab the our React application, which is right here. I don't want to have this on dual screen so that we can actually see things updating in real time. So jumping now over into my client, I'm going to go ahead and make a few changes. If I go into source, I know I don't want this test file. I'm going to delete that. I don't want this logo, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go into app.js, and I'm going to remove the logo here. And I'm going to remove everything that's in app.js, and I'm going to call this template off application. Save, okay, so that's there. I'm also going to go into app.css. I'm going to get rid of everything there. So I think we're about good here. Just for ease of CSS, what I am going to do is use Bootstrap. So I'm going to go over to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to grab that. I don't ever like these comments being in here, so I'm just going to go to these comments, but I'm just pasting in the CSS link and then the 3 Bootstrap scripts as well. It's loads in there. Don't need that HTML anymore. This is gone. Okay, so we can tell that Bootstrap is working because of the font change. Cool. There are some packages that we're going to need. So what I want to do now is go ahead and install what we need first, and then we're going to start building the front end. So the packages we're going to need for this are, we need to cd into client, and then we do npm install, and I'm going to use Axios on the front end. I'm going to use something called JWT decode with a hyphen. We're going to use Moment, which we're familiar with. We're also going to use React Router DOM for routing, and that should be it, I think. I'm going to give those a second to load. While we're doing that, inside of my source, I'm going to create a components folder where all our components are going to go. And we're going to have a couple of different components. So we're going to have login.js, and we're going to have dashboard.js, and we're going to have a no match. So basically what these are is login is going to be the landing page. You'll have to log in. Once you log in, it'll reroute you to dashboard. Now, if you don't log in, you are not going to be able to access whatever is inside of dashboard. Should you go to any route that's not logged in on dashboard, you're going to end up with the no match. So the no match one is really easy to do. We're just going to import React from React. We're going to export default function node match. No props or anything. All we're going to do is return a div that says for page not. Now, so we're going to come back a little bit. I'll get rid of that for now. Okay, so all of this is up and running. So I'm going to cd back into my root, and I'm going to run npm run dev this time. That's going to start my node server on port 5000. It's also going to start my React application up on port 3000. And to make sure that those both work together, what we want to do is go to the package.json, and right here, we're going to add a proxy. That proxy is going to be localhost, HTTP / localhost 5000. That's the port that our node application is running on. We have to save there. This is good. We're up and running. Cool. So I always like to start by making my components really easy, so we know that that app is just doing template auth application. And so login, we're going to do the same thing. So you can use the shortcut if that's going to work for you. If you have snippets, you can use ICE. But essentially, now we're going to make these classes. We have class app extends components. We're going to get rid of this function right here. And we're going to import component along with React. And this is going to require a render. So just a return is now a class component. Okay, we save. That's still working. I'm going to grab all of that, go to the login. And I'm going to call this login. I'm going to export login. And this is now login page. And then we'll make this good. Okay, I'm going to copy that one to the dashboard. Change login to dashboard, and save. And that's it. So those are now working. But what we need to do is actually set up our routing so that we can access each of those. So I go back to my app. I'm going to import a few things here. We're going to have to import browser router, and we're going to import that as router. We're going to import route and switch. And we're going to import those from React router DOM. And we're going to import each of our components. We're going to import login from /component/login. We're going to import dashboard from components/dashboard. And we're going to import no match from components/no match. Now we actually want to use these down here. So instead of this, we're actually now going to have our router. Inside of that, we're going to have a switch, and we're going to have our route. So we'll have route exact path equals / I want to render the login component. So we're not going to have an actual login /login route. We're going to have just the default page, the home page will be the login page. And then we're also going to have route exact path equals /dashboard. And that's going to render our dashboard component. But we'll be coming back and changing these a little later. And then we'll have a catch-all. So route says component equals no match. So basically, if this is the default in the switch statement, right? So if we don't have / or /dashboard, then render the no match component. So I hit save, and this one says module not found. Cannot find login.js. Cannot resolve. Oh, it's because I copied this over. We don't need that in there. We don't need that in there. Okay, login page. Now we're at /. If I go to /dashboard, we get dashboard page. And if I go to / anything else, we're going to get our 404 page not found. We're at the login page, and that's it. Now we're set. We've got our value set up and work ready to go, and we can actually start working on what our login page is going to look like and the functionality for that. Cool. So what we're going to do is start setting up our login page. We're going to have a constructor, and this is going to call super because we're extending from a parent component. I'm going to say this.state equals, we're going to have an email, which will be an empty string, and a password, which will be an empty string. And we're going to have errors object, which is set from empty objects. You remember on our routes earlier on, we returned these error messages like user password could not be validated or user not found. We're actually going to use those in our application. Okay, so we've got our constructor. And then we want to do is go ahead and actually just set up our application. So in our return, so I'm going to get rid of this login page header because we're now actually going to have a form. I'm going to call this div class name equals login just to have something to wrap everything in. And we're going to have div class name equals container. These are just Bootstrap classes now. Div class name equals row. And we're going to have this in the middle. So I'm going to do class name equals, I want this 6 columns wide. And I'm going to say M auto, which is going to say margins auto. The left and right margins will be auto, which means this will actually be centered. And I'm going to have this all set up in a card. So I'm going to put div class name equals card. And we're going to have a card body. And again, you can look up all of these classes on Bootstrap on the website. And so in this card, we're now going to have a header which says, which is h1 class name. And we display 4, so we're going to get a big header, and we're going to have that in the center. And this header is going to say log. So I hit save. All right, here's our card. It's in the middle of the page. All it says is login. Not very fancy, but it's there. Okay. Inside of this underneath this H1, but inside of the card, we're now going to have our form, right? So with Bootstrap, we always have a form group. So we're going to have password and username. So I'm going to have 2 form groups. And I'm going to have a button at the end. So we're going to have an input of type equals submit. And a class is going to be btn primary. And I'm going to give that some margin at the top, G4. And we can self-close that. Save, you can see my button popped up. But now we're going to just go ahead and put in our inputs right here. So input is a self-closing tag, and then we have a few things here. We're going to have a class name. It's going to be form control. We're going to have a placeholder, which is email address, ... We're going to have a name, which is email. We're going to have a type, which is email. And we're going to have a value, which is equal to this.state.email. And we're going to have an onChange, which we haven't created yet, but we are going to have an onChange function. I'm going to take that and I'm going to copy that down into this form group, which change a couple of things. This is going to say password, and the name will be password, and the type will be password, and the value will be this.state.password. If I save that, here we are. You can see Google actually autofilled, but hitting the submit button doesn't actually do anything for us at this point. So what we can do though is go ahead and make it so that using our React tools here, we actually are going to get state. See here, email is nothing, password is nothing. and these don't even work for us. So we do need our onChange and we do need our onSubmit component, our functions right here. So I'm going to say onChange, which is going to take an event, and this.setState. And hopefully you are at this point familiar with this function, the e.target.name, e.target.value. Save that. I'm also going to have an onSubmit, which takes an event and does e.prevent default. And what I actually want to do is just grab the data and console log it for right now. So we're going to say const new user equals, and we're going to get the email off the page, which is going to be this.state.email. And the password, which is going to be this.state.password. Hit save. And then let's go ahead and just console.log user. Okay. So you can actually see by filling in my email at gmail.com, you can see this is changing in state and password right here, password. Go back over to console and hit submit. We did get a, it did refresh for us, and that's because we actually haven't called this onSubmit function yet. So we do that here, we say onSubmit equals this.onSubmit. Using these inputs right here, we're going to console, hit that. Here's our console log from line 27 right here. Let's actually notice saying that I need a class name. So 63 right here. So this should actually say class name. Okay, now that's gone. Excellent. So what I want to do now is actually make it so that I can log in for this form, right? So in my onSubmit, we're going to need to make an Axios call. So I'm going to import Axios from Axios. And all we're going to do is log in and just console log the response. So we know that we can go over here, right? I can go to login. Here's my login round. If I hit send, it's going to send this stuff back. So all I want to do is like return this now to the browser. So I'm going to do an Axios.post. And this is going to go to /API/user/login. And it's going to send along with it new user. Right? This is our object right here that we created. After that .post, we're going to get a promise. We're going to get a response. And we're just going to console.log response.data. We'll also catch, just in case, we'll err, and we'll console.log err.response.data. Okay. So now if I hit submit, we're getting post, localhost 3000, API/user/login, not found. So this is usually, so something is now not proxying. Let's just double check. Proxy is 5000. Cannot post /API/user/login. /API/user/login. Why? So it's going to 3000, which tells me that our proxy is not working. Yeah. It's going to kill that. I'm going to run npm run dev again. Okay, there we go. We just needed to kill the server and restart it. And now that's proxying correctly. So now we're actually getting our console log response.data. If I go ahead and just change my email address up here to something that doesn't exist, you can actually see our error.response.data that's being console logged is user not found. Do that here. Put the user found, but now the password is wrong. Submit, user password cannot be validated. So I actually want to handle those. Errors real quick. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually, instead of just console logging them, I'm going to set them to state. Okay. So we've got our empty errors object, and all we're going to do is do this dot set state. Errors is now set to error.response.data. Okay. So now if I go like this, get a username that doesn't exist, and I check my React tools, I go to login, we go to state, errors, we've got an object, user not found. Now we can do this nice thing where all we do is we come down beneath the input, and we're going to use curly braces because we're going to use some JavaScript. We're going to say errors.user and. So this is React's way of doing conditional. So if errors.user exists, we want to generate this content, which is going to be a div, and give this a style of styles.error, which will style in a second. That div. And inside this div, we want to just display a message, right? Errors.user, which is user could not be found. Errors.user. We want to do the same thing for password. So we're going to go underneath the input for password. And we're going to say errors.password. Display errors.password. Hit save. Now it's telling us that none of this exists. So what we need to do here is get errors from state. So I'm going to destructure that. Equals this dot state. That's going to get rid of that first one. And then styles doesn't exist. And we're going to add that in right at the top here. We're going to say const styles equals. I'm going to say error. Is that the name of the style? I think that we used errors styles dot styles.error. Yeah. Error. I'm going to give it a color of red. Do University of Utah red. I'm going to do font size, and I want to be slightly smaller than normal. So 1 rem would be normal, 0.8 rem is slightly below normal. We're going to have no margin as well. I'm going to hit save. Now if I go ahead and type something and hit submit, user not found. So what it did is it detected that there's now an errors.user message, and it displayed that message. Same thing as if I get rid of this and I put in a password that doesn't work, we're going to get user password could not be validated. If I go ahead and type the right password, which is password, and hit submit, we're good. Okay. Actually, what we probably want to do is make sure we clear these errors on a successful login. So here we can do this dot set state, and we'll say errors set that to an empty object again. So if we get our error and then we change it, now we're good. Awesome. So what we need now, though, is unsuccessful entry, right? So if we get a successful login, we actually want it to redirect us to localhost 3000 / dashboard. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, bearing in mind, we haven't protected anything yet. So you just saw that I can actually go to localhost 3000 and I can do dashboard, and we can get there just fine, right? So we're going to protect that in a little bit. But the way to handle redirects, the way we do that is we're going to come up and we're going to import an additional thing called redirect from React router DOM. And we need to set that in state. So the way it works is redirect will work once redirect is set to true. So we're going to have redirect is false right here. And inside of our render, we're going to need an if statement. So under our destructuring of errors, we can say if redirect, right? So if redirect is true, and we're going to pull that out of state as well. So if redirect is true, we want to return, and then this is where we're using the redirect package that we just installed, redirect to, so it's kind of like a link, dashboard. So then it's just a matter of making sure that redirect gets set to true on successful authentication. So we can actually come up to where we log in. Instead of just doing errors as a blank object, we can say redirect true. Hit save, hit submit, and now when we submit, here we are back at the dashboard. But of course, even without logging in, we can get the dashboard. So we're going to protect that route in a second. I think that's about everything we need to do there. So let's go ahead and protect the route. So protecting a route is not overly difficult, but there are a few things that we need to be able to do. So what we basically are going to do when we protect a route is we're going to check to see whether a token can be authenticated. And we do that by wrapping a route inside of a private route. So I'm going to come over to source, and we're going to do a new folder, and I'm going to call this utils. And I'm going to create a new file called private route.js. And inside of private route, we're going to import React from React. And we're going to import that redirect that we were just using a second ago. We're also going to import route from React router DOM. We're also going to need to import and authenticate. In fact, let's go ahead and create that now. So I want to create a new file, and I'm going to call this Authentication.js. And here we're going to, let's do this. Let's just write out this private route first. So we're going to say const, so we're going to have const private route equals, and what's going to happen here is we're going to say component, and we're going to put in all the props by doing a spread operator and saying rest. You don't really have to understand too much of exactly what's going on here. But essentially what we do is we return a route with all the props. And then we call an authenticate method. So let me go ahead and just put this out. Oh, authenticate. We want to check that the authenticate method returns true. If it does return true, what we're going to do is render the component that was originally requested along with all its props. Otherwise, if it cannot be authenticated, we're going to redirect to, and we're going to go to, and get this right here. We need two curly braces. We need a path name, which is where we're going to redirect to, which we want to go back to / which is the login. And the state is going to be from props.location. So this just tells our application where we got redirected from. So then we can go ahead and close that component. And this sometimes looks a little easier if you can put it down like this. Like this. I'll put state down here. That's that one. And then we actually need to close the route component that we've got open up here. And we need our curly braces, our semicolons. And then we're going to export default private route. This is going to make sense in a second. So essentially what we're doing is we've got a route, right? This whole thing is a one route that takes in everything that we passed it. And we're going to check whether it's authenticated. We're going to check whether it's authenticated by calling this authenticate method, which we haven't written yet. If that authenticated method returns true, go ahead and render the component we want, which would be dashboard. If we didn't authenticate successfully, redirect to /. Okay. So if we go over and create the authenticate route, here's our function, const authenticate, doesn't take any parameters. And we're going to assume the token is true. Okay. And what we're actually going to do is grab our token potentially from local storage if we need to. So I'm going to say let local token equal local storage. get item, and we're going to grab this from example app, and we're going to say if local token. So we're going to check to see if a local token was stored. And in fact, we can go ahead and just store that token on login. If we go back to our login form, so we are redirecting, which is true. And then what I actually want to do is, if we get a response back, and if that token has if that response has a token, we're going to have response.data.token. Remember, in our response, we're actually getting this token back. So if response.data.token, we'll destructure that equals response.data, and then we'll say local storage.set item. We'll set it as example app, and we're going to give it a token. And then we'll actually call this set state right here. Okay, so let me show you that real quick. Hit submit, it redirects, but what it's done now is actually gone ahead and given us an example app token, which has been stored here. Okay, so when we authenticate a route, what we actually want to do is grab that token out of local storage. If there is a local token, we're going to decode it using something called JWT decode and give it local token. We just need to import that. So we're going to say import JWT decode from JWT. There's no difference in underscore here to hyphen for the actual package name. Okay. And you remember the token, when we actually decode a token, it's going to give us a time on that token. So what we're going to do is actually check to see whether the expiration date is still valid. So we're going to do const current time equals new date. So we're just going to get the current time right now. Equals new date dot get time divided by 1,000. And then we're going to say if current time is greater than the expiration time that's on the token, we're going to set token valid to false, right? We're going to change this right up here, token valid false. And then we're going to return token valid. Otherwise, return token valid. And if there's no local token at all, we actually just want to return null. Okay? And export default authenticate. So we'll export that. So now what that will do is basically take in a token and it will check whether it can be authenticated. So private route, what this is actually going to do is going to authenticate whether it's true or not once that has been called. So now what we do is we go over to app.js and we actually import that right here. So we're going to import private route from /utils/private route. And then we change this right here to private route. We're getting private route line 9 authenticate is not defined, just because we need to import that. So import authenticate from authenticate. And we're just importing from here, we're importing this method right here. Yeah, save. And authenticate saying line 13, expected an assign more function call. Oh, this should be equals. Excellent. So we go back to the main page, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I have to delete all of those. So local storage is now clear. Okay, so now if I go up here and I go /dashboard, see how it just redirects us back to the main page. That's it. We can't get in. This is now protected. So what's happening is we're trying to go to the route /dashboard. Because it's a private route, it jumps over to the private route component. And here's our route, which we're used to seeing. And it's saying before you render anything, call the authenticate method. Goes to the authenticate method, which is here. Authenticate method pulls the local token. If there is one, does all the authentication. If there isn't one, it's going to return null. In this case, there isn't one. So it returns null, which means this is not true. Authenticate did not return true. It returned null, right? So it doesn't return true. It's actually, so it's not going to render this component. It's actually going to redirect to /. Now, how do we have a token in here, which is going to happen when we log in, right? So we hit log in, we're going to get a successful response. And then we're going to set that token and then redirect. If we do that, we get the token, and here's the dashboard page. So the only issue is now, if I refresh, if I come out of here, this should still work. If I go localhost 3000 /dashboard, that works. The issue is I can still get to the login page. We don't want users to be able to keep logging in all the time if they're already logged in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the login application, the login component, and right after we log in, remember we've got false up here. We're going to initiate basically an instant check. Our component did mount because we want it to check as soon as the component mounts. We're going to say const token equals local storage dot get item example app. I'm going to say if authenticate token. So this is basically going to say, hey, if this is true, if we call the authenticate function and we pass it token, this dot set state redirect true. Okay. So now if I try and go back to the login page when I'm logged in, we can't even get back there. We are logged in. So that's pretty cool, right? What we do want to do now though is set up our dashboard a little bit so that it's a little nicer and we have a login button. So we're going to go to dashboard. And what we're going to do here is I'm gonna have state again because we want to be able to redirect away from here if we log out. So we're going to have redirect false. And in the render, I'm going to say const redirect equals this state. So we'll destructure that. And we're going to say if redirect is true, return redirect to, we want to go back to /. So why are we doing that? Because basically, if we log out, we want the user to be thrown back to the login page and not left in the dashboard, right? So in the dashboard, I'm just going to create a few new things here. So we're going to have a return. We'll have an h1 that says, let's put this in a container actually. So we'll have div class name equals container. We'll have an h1 that says dashboard. Okay. I'll need to import redirect from React router DOM. Oh, I have a spelling mistake here, that's why. Redirect. Okay, so now I have dashboard. And then let's just have a p tag that says you have successfully authenticated. Okay, so if I get rid of this, refresh, here I am. If I give my users incorrect, that still works. That still works. If I put in the right credentials, dashboard, you have successfully authenticated. And we're going to set up a little profile page that we're going to come to later. We're going to have a P that says welcome. And I'm just going to put name. Let's just put, we'll put username right here. And I just want to wrap this in a strong tag. And then this is going to say email address. So we're also going to display member since and last updated. So say member since and last updated. Okay, so that you can see we're building that out. And then we also want a button of class name equals btn danger, because I want this to be red. And that's going to be a logout button. Okay, cool. It doesn't do anything. What we do want to do though is handle the logout. So we're going to say on click equals this dot handle logout. We're going to come back up here, and now we're going to write handle logout equals. Now we've got our function ready to go. And this is real simple. All we're going to do is local storage dot remove item example app. So we're going to remove this token right here. We're going to get rid of this. It's just going to be gone. And then we're going to say this dot set state redirect true. Okay. So now I should be able to hit this. It redirected us to the page. It allowed us to go to this page because this token was no longer there. So it could no longer authenticate the application. I can submit. I can log in all day long. Sweet. So from there, what I want to do now is basically grab the user profile that's in here. You can ignore these warnings. They're not super important for what we're doing. I actually want to be able to grab the user that's actually in here. So the way to do that is we're basically going to have a route that gets the current user. Okay. So we're gonna hop back over to our user routes real quick, and I'm gonna come up here. I'm gonna tap this in here. So I'm gonna say at route. This is gonna be a get route. It's gonna be /API /users. /user, and it's gonna be at route. And it's gonna say, sorry, not at route. Description is gets current user. So we have app.get, and do /API /user. And we want this to be an authenticated route because we only want someone to be able to get the current user if they're logged in. So password.authenticate, JWT, session false. That's still going to return our request and our response, our arrow function. And we're going to say db.user.find1, and then we're going to say where ID is rec.user ID. So we're getting the ID out of that JWT token that has been decoded here. If there's a user, .then user, we're going to say if user res.status to 100.json, and we're just going to send the user back. And for the purpose of this, we're going to say if there's an error, just console.log the error. Okay, unexpected token. We need ID, like the user right here. Okay. So now once we're on the dashboard, what we actually want to do is get that. Is basically hit this route, right? So we know we can come over here and we can do localhost 5000/API/user, and our authorization token. We'll grab that from here. Go to bearer, and drop that in, hit send, and here it is, right? Here's our current user. So if we go to dashboard, what we're going to need is a component did mount, and we're going to say const token equals local storage. Actually, let's just do an Axios call real quick. So we're going to do, because I want to show you how what's going to happen here when we do this. We're going to do Axios get, and it's going to be /API/user. dot then response, and let's just do console.log response.data, and we'll just do response. In here we'll do .catch console.log response. Okay. Axios is not defined, so we deploy an Axios, so import Axios from Axios, and then I also have a spelling error right here. Cool. So you can actually see we're getting this unauthorized back right here, right? This is like if we went here and I actually went to authorization and I take this out and I hit send, I get unauthorized back, right? That's what I'm getting here. I'm getting the response of data unauthorized. So with Postman, it's real easy to add the authorization header. We just go to authorization tab, we select bearer token, and we just paste it in here. We hit send, and here's our stuff. We can set the headers manually with Axios. However, there's actually a really nice way to do it that Axios will do it for us, and then we'll store it in memory. So what we'll do is we're going to go to utils. We're going to create a new file. We're going to call this set.auth_token.js. And in here, we're going to import, Axios from Axios. And then we say const set, we're just making another custom function here, set auth token, which is going to take in a token. And we're going to say if token exists, which it should do because we passed it in, but just to verify it exists, we're going to say axios.defaults.headers.common. And now we're going to say basically .authorization equals token. Else, if we're not adding a token, we want to delete axios.defaults.headers.common brackets authorization. And then we're going to export that, export default set auth token. So now we can use this. And what this basically does is it takes the token and it sets the token as the default authorization header. So that's what we're doing here when we do Postman. We're going to authorization. So we can send a body, but we're also sending a header, which is this right here. So now what we want to do is come over back to dashboard. And before we do the Axios call, we actually want to say const token equals local storage.getItem. Example. So we're going to grab the token. Now we want to set it as the default Axios header. So we say if token exists, set auth token, and give it that token. Okay, and we have already imported it. So we can now hit save. And if I log out and log back in, you'll notice that what we're still getting is this unauthorized thing, right? And so what we need to do is make sure that when we actually are logging in, that we're also setting that auth token to a default header. So we're going to jump back over to login, and we're going to come down to unsubmit. We're going to find our successful calls. We got if response.data.token, local storage.setItem token, and now I'm going to say set auth token, and I'm going to pass token in here as well. And we just need to make sure. Oh, we already imported that. Okay, good. So we hit save. And then let's go ahead and log out here. There's no token. Hit submit. We've got this token here. Now, if we look at this, we'll actually see we're not getting unauthorized. We are actually getting response.data back. And now we can start plugging this data into our route here. So go back over to dashboard. Instead of just console.logging response, what I'm going to have here is user, which is going to be an empty object, in state. And I'm going to say this.setState user is going to be response.data. Log out. Log back in. And now we're getting unauthorized. Why are we getting unauthorized? Just make sure that that actually cooks. If we come down to dashboard, user, okay, so that's all there. So that all set to state. So what we could do is actually plug that in. And what I'm going to do is import a couple of other things. I don't know if do we npm install React Moment package? We didn't do React Moment, so I'm going to just kill this. I'm going to do npm. I'm going to cd into client, npm install React Moment. Okay, back out of client, npm run dev, and back to the dashboard here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to import moment from React Moment because we want to be able to format these members since the last updated dates. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a user from state. So we know that we're going to have inside of state, we're going to have this user object once we log in. Right, back on the dashboard, here's our user object right here. So then I'm going to, instead of welcome username, we're going to say user.firstname. This is going to be user.email. This is going to be, I'm just going to put these in as is right now, which is going to be in the user.created at. And this is going to be user.updated. Save on that. Oh, I missed a curly brace right here. Log out, log in. And now you can see welcome Alexander, email address like down. Remember, since this timestamp, right? So actually we want to go ahead and change that timestamp. And that's what we can use moment for. So the way you use moment in React, you use moment. Here's our component. And you pass in the date, which is going to be this user.created at, and the format that you want, which is going to be /mm 4ys /mm/db. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Oh, I don't have a slash here. Slash. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for this one right here. I'm going to take user.created at and change that right here. Okay, so now you can see this. I'm going to log out, log back in, and now we've got, remember, since 2019 or 9/17, last updated. Also the same. We just need to have space here. That's no spacing from React, and then we're good. So dashboard. So I think we're all good here. Component amount. This is not updating when we refresh, and the reason is because I think it's because of this token. Let me try something real quick. No, that's not working either. For some reason, we're getting an unauthorized here. /API/user. So that works. Then when we refresh, it's not working. Component didn't mount. We'll have to look into that. Access.default to headers.com authorization. That's good. Private route. Return route, res, render, props, authenticate equals true. Component props redirect. Two path names, date from props allocation. Okay, I'm not entirely sure why that's not authenticating. Okay, let token valid, true, local store example app. So that should be getting that correctly. Example dash app. If local token, const decoded. Let's do console log decode. So it's grabbing that just fine. The dashboard, component didn't mount. I'm going to console log this. That log token here. So it's actually console logging null. Oh, well, that's silly. I actually, for some reason, I've written example item and it should be example app. There it is. So hit log out. We can log back in. And that's it. We're pretty much done. I don't think there's anything else we really need to do. We can log out. We are handling our errors. We can log in, and we can actually display the data from the profile. So that's it, really. That is Passport JWT authentication. Hopefully that helped.